So here are the three things I think are important when building these kinds of systems, right? So the first one is you kind of really have to very, very hardly think about your data. Like you generate the data, so what will your data be? The other thing you learn is that more is always better, okay? So maybe not in everything in life more is better, but with data, more is always better, right? So in some sense, what this means is that, but you cannot be just greedy and say, I'll wait half a year and I'll get everything, right? You cannot. So kind of the point is, you need to kind of to try to do as much as you can, get as much as you can, but be also kind of as fast and as lean as possible, because you will fail many times, right? So balancing doing a lot, but doing it quickly is kind of an important part. And then the last part that is also important is really thinking hard about evaluation. How do you measure success of your system? And when I say measure success, I don't only mean measure success through an A/B test. That is fine, but usually A/B test takes weeks before you get something out. But you want to iterate on an hourly basis. So how can you measure your success offline? Meaning some offline metrics that will correlate well with your online metrics. Okay? So those are three things. So now I want to go through each one of those, talk more about them, and give you some examples of things that we learned on the way. Right? So the first thing is kind of really knowing your data. And in some sense what this means is there is no objective way when you create a data set, right? It's all kind of gut driven. And the data set creation is usually the first step, and it's kind of the most important step. Because the way you will create your data set, that will determine how good your offline metrics are, what are the biases in the data, things like that, right? So it's an immensely important step, but it's also very, very hard to do. Another thing is that kind of creating the data set is not what you want. What you want to do is deploy the model in production, right? So really thinking about how do you create a data set and how that relates to production becomes very, very important. So some of the lessons from here are that it's very important to build tools that allow you to look at the data, that allow you to debug the data, that allow you to debug the models, and to be able to do iterations very, very quickly. And of course, kind of the important step is to try to build as much intuition about the domain you are trying to model as possible. So why is this important, right? This is important because, as I was saying, there are many subtleties in how we generate the data, right? How do we sample the users? What characteristics of the data we want to capture? How do those characteristics change over time? Also not just the characteristics of the data, but also the features may change over time. And kind of many times we make choices based on some computational constraints. For example, when you choose the ratio of positive to negative examples, because you just have too many negative examples. So how do you kind of deal there? What should the data set size be? That's always a question. Usually we take as much as we can, but then our training gets too slow. So again, that is kind of a hard problem. And what turns out is that varying these things kind of has a big impact on the final success, and has much more impact than deciding should I use this machine learning algorithm or not, should I use this particular regularization factor, should I use a kernelized version method. Kind of things don't matter. This is really kind of very, very important part. Kind of the first order problem is how do you generate your data. So kind of what we learn is that it's more important to examine, vary, test all these differences than, for example, go and tweak the learning algorithm you are using at the end. So that's kind of one lesson, is that data generation is kind of super important.